Welcome to R&R Living Life. Today is an exploring day to Cape Perrin. Last night, just after we had gone to bed, the wind began to blow at around 60 kilometres per hour, so Rick got up and took in the awning, as did our neighbours. By the time we went exploring today, the wind had died down and we were set for a beautiful day. Our day began with us making our way through the Francis Poron National Park, an impressive area of acacia-cloaked red dunes, arid shrublands and rolling sand plains, while in the distance we could just make out the turquoise waters of Shark Bay. The road was quite good up until the Heritage Precinct, where we had to lower the tyre pressures, and the track narrowed to soft sand that was challenging in places. The rolling sandhills and plains were interspersed with salty gypsum hollows known locally as Beredis. Francis Poron National Park covers an area of 52,500 hectares, half of the entire pastoralise of Perrin Station, once a sheep station, and is within the boundary of the Shark Bay World Heritage Area. The park was gazetted a national park in 1993, after being bought by the state government in 1990. The geology of the park is simultaneously ancient, modern, and constantly changing. Land that was dried during the last ice age is now flooded, and seagrasses grow where wallabies once roamed. Sediments trapped by seagrass meadows have created barriers affecting salinity, tidal flow, and ecosystems. As usual, we drove to conditions and enjoyed the scenery, giving me time to take lots of photos, though it was a little rough in places, with the track to Cape Perrin becoming very soft and rutted around Cattle Well. While travelling through the park, we saw many salt lagoons. These landlocked saline lakes support specifically adapted plants and animal species, where the sea has reflooded some coastal bereders, creating the inland bays like Big Lagoon, which are thriving ecological sites, located at the transition of the arid and temperate botanical areas. At least 53 plant species are endemic to the Shark Bay region, and this restricted range means that some are quite rare. I was intrigued by the red tips on some of the plants around the lake edges, so bright. The tip of Perrin Peninsula sits at the confluence of two major currents, with spectacular views of the red sand dunes against the brilliant white beaches, surrounded by the turquoise waters. At the north tip of Cape Perrin was picnic tables and drop toilets, while at Slipjack Point there was two spectacularly located viewing platforms perched on the cliff top overlooking the blue teal waters, where we could see lemon sharks, turtles, and manta rays. First we walked to the tip across the rich red sand, and were rewarded with views of the crystal clear waters and the cormorant rookery on the beach beneath the cliff. It was stunning, the contrast between the white beaches, red cliffs, and blue waters. Photos do not do justice to the scene. From the tip we drove a short way to Slipjack Point, where Rick saw an echidna as he got out of the boat. The boardwalk perched on the cliff edge provided spectacular views along the coastline and out into Shark Bay. Further out in the bay were Dory and Bernier Islands that channel the waters from the Indian Ocean south into the bay, while to the west was the tip of Dirk Hartog Island, forming a channel between the islands into Shark Bay. Such a vibrant landscape. Present-day Perrin Peninsula is made from the sand from about 200 kilometres northeast in what is the present-day Kennedy Ranges, where sediments of an ancient long dry seabed were weathered away and carried to sea by a network of tributaries and rivers, or blown against the Perrin anticline, between 2 million and 10,000 years ago. Reaching Shark Bay as quartz grains or sand, which accumulated against a series of long high ridges shaped into rolling dunes. These wind-blown deposits are known as Perrin sandstone. The red colour is due to a thin iron oxide coating around the sand grains and underlies most of Shark Bay, but is only exposed on Perrin Peninsula and Frau Island. Francis Poron National Park was named after the French naturalist and explorer Francois Perron in recognition of his contribution to recording Australian natural and social history. He had meticulously documented anthropological, oceanography, meteorological and zoological findings during Nicholas Borden's 1801-1803 scientific expeditions to Western Australia. In the late 1880s, a pearl camp was also established at Harold Bright, where pearl shells still littered the beach. It was also the site of a canning factory, the remains of which are still visible today. On the way to the tip we passed Crusher's Tank, an interesting piece of history about a one-legged man who broke his leg during his weekly 70-kilometre trip from Denham to Harold Bright and return. In 1916, the unfortunate one-legged entrepreneur Leon Crusher, a pearler in Shark Bay, perished trying to find a water tank in the middle of the arid landscape. While on his way to buy pearls and collect mail at Harold Bright, his horse threw him, breaking his good leg, the other being made from cork. Having left Denham on the 22nd of September 1916, his 2-day journey came to a sad end. When he did not return by the 28th, 2 local pearlers from Denham set out in search of him. They were only a few miles out of town when they ran into an employee of Crusher's from the pearling camp at Harold Bright, carrying the caught leg that he had found on the track the previous evening. He had searched for Crusher, but had not found him. They set out to search for him, only to find his body under a wattle tree. Before he died, Crusher documented what had happened in a signed letter in his pocketbook. Such a sad incident, but highlights the harsh reality of this remote and arid region. On our return journey, we stopped to check out Bottle Bay with its plunging red sea cliffs that frame the coastal landscape of red, white and blue, with coral strewn across the beach. The Gregories and South Gregory were beautiful and looked to be great campsites. We decided to check out Harold Bright as well. At the end of a very rough sandy track, we were rewarded with very soft deep sand gouged and churned up by wheel tracks, so did not venture far onto the beach. Between the flies and the strong wind-blowing sand, it was not altogether a pleasant spot. How naive I was! I had thought I had seen a lot of Australia, having travelled most of Queensland and at least half of New South Wales, Tasmania and into the Territory, but travelling has given me a better understanding of how different Australia is from state to state, region to region and shire to shire. Even within a region, the landscape can be vastly different. The geology of this area, with its sandy beaches, rocky headlands, fore dunes and stable dunes, is vastly different to what I had expected. Since our visit to Western Australia, I have found many more landscapes to visit in areas we had travelled. We had only seen a very small part of what was out there. Even the plants we saw, with over 700 flowering species, many endemic to this region, what a sight it would have been during the wildflower season, since some plants are typical of cooler, wetter areas, while others are more desert-adapted species, with the 2 botanical zones overlapping in a region of tree heath. Even William Dampier in 1699 collected and was impressed with the plants found in the area, so I was not alone in my interest. Unfortunately, we did not see any of the animals known to inhabit the area, other than the echidna and a couple of kangaroos, though we did see and hear some of the bird life. Over the past week we have seen geological history dating back around 3.5 billion years, when the region was part of an ancient continental landmass, where stromatolites were created by microbial life forms, beaches of shells were formed, rugged coastal cliffs were shaped by the rising and falling sea levels during tectonic activity that separated Australia and the Indian plates, forming the Indian Ocean, leaving behind ancient dune systems and sandstone cliffs. We have had a fascinating glimpse into the incredible forces that have shaped and are shaping our planet and the Shark Bay area. On returning to Denham, we went to IGA and stocked up on supplies ready for travelling the next day. That afternoon we spent some time revisiting where we had been over the past couple of days. The colours of the landscape had been unbelievable, nothing like what we had seen to date. The sand was next level, as they say, though not as corrugated as Steep Point, but softer and more cut up. Driving back through it in the middle of the day when it was softer was interesting, but having been over it once, Rick knew what to expect, making it easier to drive through. I could see what draws people to the area, not only for the beautiful beaches, but the peace and quiet, although the flies and the wind-blowing sand would be a drawback. It really was a beautiful place. Denham had been a magical couple of days, such a great place to stay. From Denham we made our way towards Carnarvon, back past Gullet Bluff, Nanga Resort, Shell Beach and Hamlin Pool to the Overlander Roadhouse by mid-morning. From the roadhouse we followed the northwest coastal highway through country that had been seeded with buffel grass, more prominent along the side of the road, in drains and where the water lay. It was quite green in places, so green pick for the animals. It was around 200 kilometres from the Overlander, with some stunning country. There were long straight stretches, undulating sections of the highway, with numerous dips and waterways. We did pass a few goats, but rarely saw any other wildlife. I had expected this area to be very dry, but was surprised to see it so green. But then again, we had been lucky enough to have followed where the rain had been all the way across from South Australia. We stopped at Wooramel Lookout, or otherwise known as the Gladstone Lookout, overlooking the Gladstone National Park, one of a handful of hills in this otherwise reasonably flat area of Western Australia. The narrow sealed road is about 250 metres of a winding steep climb, but the view from the top was worth it. This stony plateau with 360-degree views of Shark Bay, giving some insight into its massive size, the intertidal area towards Hamlin Pool and Frowes Sill, the surrounding countryside and the ranges we were passing through. The lookout is close to the 26th parallel, which is the bottom of the northwest region in Western Australia. We had passed the sign a couple of kilometres south along the highway. The closer we got to Carnarvon, the countryside changed, especially the vegetation on the side of the road, and from driver's side to passenger side, often where the water lay in places. I was surprised by the high levee bank we crossed over on our way into Carnarvon. Carnarvon lies at the mouth of the Gascoyne River on the Indian Ocean. The town was founded in 1883, initially as a port and supply centre for the surrounding region, with the town site gazetted in June 1891. The jetty was built in the late 1890s and has reached its maximum length in 1904. In 2021 it was destroyed by the cyclone Seroja. Seroja was an interesting cyclone. Due to the presence of the weakening tropical cyclone Odette, Seroja re-strengthened and absorbed Odette into its circulation, causing the system to steer southeast towards Australia before strengthening further. Seroja continued to steadily intensify as it approached the Gascoyne region. At around 8 p.m. local time on the 11th of April, Seroja made landfall on the western coastline of Western Australia as a Category 3 severe tropical cyclone, slightly south of the coastal town of Kalbarri, bringing heavy rain and hurricane-force wind gusts of about 170 kilometres per hour. Later that day, Seroja began accelerating southeastward while weakening. On the 12th of April, the remnants of Seroja emerged off the Great Australian Bight on the southern coast of Western Australia, while beginning to transition into an ex-tropical cyclone, before being absorbed into a larger ex-tropical cyclone mass in the Southern Ocean. The Wooramel River is an ephemeral river in the Gascoyne region of Western Australia. Nearby is the Wooramel Station, a family-owned working cattle, sheep, goat and outback station stay occupying an area of 1,430 square kilometres, with 60 kilometres of coastal frontage to the Indian Ocean and backing onto the Shark Bay World Heritage Area. The river is an upside-down river, running on the surface only 2 to 3 times a year for a couple of weeks at a time after good inland rains or cyclone events. The floodplains were well grassed, with the coastal plains providing natural salt and blue bush pastures, along with wagyu and acacia bushland. On arriving in Carnarvon, we parked up at a caravan park on the outskirts of town, surrounded by beautiful, colourful bougainvillea hedges. After we had set up, we went into town to check out what it had to offer. Carnarvon sits on the edge of the mighty Gascoyne River Delta. The river and aquifer supports Carnarvon's thriving agricultural industry, including bananas, mangoes, papaya, carambola melons, grapes and a huge variety of vegetables. Some you could buy from roadside stalls along the road. Between May and October there is said to be a smorgasbord of prawns, scallops, crabs and local fish to select from, hauled in by the town's own fishing fleet. The following day we visited the Carnarvon Space and Technology Museum that celebrates the history of Carnarvon in the manned space program and the Australian communications industry. The museum focused on 2 parts, the Carnarvon Tracking Station and the Overseas Telecommunications Commission satellite Earth Station, for which each station played a separate role in the early space industry. The tracking station was located 10 kilometres south of Carnarvon, being built to support NASA's Gemini, Apollo and Skylab programs. Commissioned in 1964, it operated for 11 years, being the last station to communicate with the space capsules leaving the Earth's orbit and the last to make contact before splashdown in the Indian Ocean. While at the museum, we jumped inside a full-size Apollo capsule to experience a near-to-real-life experience of the Saturn V launch, even down to the shakes and rattles during takeoff. In the Space Theatre we watched a short documentary on space communication. There was so much to see and do in the museum, with the many displays throughout the museum, including full-size Gemini and Apollo capsules, original Mercury, Gemini and Apollo consoles, an official piece of Skylab, and OC and NASA memorabilia. We also got to try and land a space shuttle and learnt about solar power, not to forget the kinetic sand that was remarkable and fun to play with. Having watched the Apollo 11 landing on the moon many years ago, it was interesting to see some of the equipment used in watching it on television. How times and advances in technology have changed. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. Give us a thumbs up if you have. Join us next time as we continue exploring Carnarvon before making our way further north. Take care and stay safe. Cheers for now. Rick and Rosemary. R&R Living Life.